Welcome to week 11, Explore the Bible. Today we continue in the book of Luke. Excited about looking at this passage. It's actually kind of a couple of little short stories that go together in this one passage, and I think you're going to enjoy that as we study this together. So let's look at Luke chapter 6 is where we are today. It says, on a Sabbath, he passed through the grain fields. Now here we go, setting up, and we're on the Sabbath, so this is an important thing. He's talking about the Sabbath, and both of these stories have to do with the Sabbath day, which for the Jews would be what we would call Saturday. So that's their day of rest, right? It's the seventh day after 6 days of creation. So now we're to the Sabbath day. He passed through the grain fields. His disciples were picking heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands and eating them. So they're walking through the grain fields and they're just kind of grabbing some things off, rubbing them in their hands, they're eating them. But some of the Pharisees said, why are you doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? Okay, so they're asking Jesus as they confront him as they're going through these fields, why are you doing this? This is not lawful. Now they had a set of laws that they had created, the regulations. It's like you say, let's take the Ten Commandments, and we'll take obviously the one that's in play here, right? Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Well, the scribes and the teachers begin to ask the question, decades, hundreds of years before, what does that mean to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy? How is it that you keep the Sabbath holy? What do you do? What do you not do to keep the Sabbath holy? And I think we need to understand before we get too quick on them that we have these ideas, we have thoughts. Some of those things are expressed as we think about a Sunday for us. You grew up in Texas. Many of you may remember the blue laws in Texas, and there still are those laws in Texas that say there are some things that can't be sold on Sunday. There are some businesses that can't be open on Sunday. So those blue laws, that was an idea that there are some things you just shouldn't do. Well, this was their idea. What do we say? And one of those things was, well, you don't go and go through the fields and harvest the field. And we say, well, they're just grabbing a few grains. They're not harvesting the field. They're meeting the need of hunger. But that was technically, they were harvesting the field. So this was unlawful. Now, it wasn't by God's law, it was by their interpretation of God's law. Okay, and that's really important, isn't it? To separate out what God actually says and how we interpret what God says. Okay, so for them, it's not lawful. So Jesus responds, haven't you read what David and those who were with him did when he was hungry? How he entered the house of God and took and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat. He even gave some to those who were with him. Then he told them, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Okay, so he goes back to Samuel. He goes back to this time of David, right? And when David is with his men and they're being pursued by Saul, and there's this whole thing that's happening between them, and David and his men are hungry, and so one day they go into the temple and eat this bread, which is this sacred bread, which is set aside only for the priest to eat. And David eats it and his men eat it. And David's not a priest and his men certainly aren't. And yet they eat that. So here's the comparable story. And Jesus says, don't you remember this? You're scribes, you're Pharisees, you're teachers of the law. You know the Bible. You know the stories, right? You know the Old Testament. Don't you remember this? Well, now, look, they did that. So he's in somewhat saying, look, there's your interpretation of what it is, and then there's what it actually is. And you need to remember and just look back and you realize that sometimes it has been interpreted differently than what you might interpret it today. So be careful about that, be humble about that. But then he says, really, you need to be humble. And at this point, the statement that Jesus makes here at the end is a controversial, to say the least, right? The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Son of Man is in Luke. That's the phrase that Jesus uses of himself to describe himself as the Son of Man. This was a title that identified him as the Messiah. It was, we see that now. Some saw, but most didn't see that at that time. They didn't get what he was saying. But Jesus is saying, I am Lord of the Sabbath. I'm the ruler over the Sabbath. Well, that's quite a statement to make, isn't it? Jesus just says, I'm the ruler of the Sabbath. For them, as they listen to it, but as we look back, we go, yeah, he's the Lord of the Sabbath. So I want us to try to understand it as Jesus wants them to understand it. They thought they were the ones who decided all the rules, and Jesus says, no, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. I'm the one who decides what is and is not right on the Sabbath, not you. Your man-made rules, your all these things you've got decided. No, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. You need to remember who is God here and who's not. I had a favorite speaker who used to say, there is a God and he's not you. That's part of what Jesus is saying. There's a God and it's not you. But then he goes farther. It's me. I am the Lord of the Sabbath. We need to be careful that we don't mistake or maybe even say substitute our ideas, our laws, our interpretations of the ramifications of a law and what it means and how it gets implemented, that we don't substitute that for what God has actually said and what his law actually is and what his word actually has laid out for us. Here he is the Lord of the Sabbath, that we are not the ones who control. He is the one who controls, and this rightful placement of who we are as opposed to who he is needs to be kept right. And Jesus is clearly here exerting some authority over them to say, you don't tell me what to do. I'm the one who tells you what to do, and you've got this backwards. Now, obviously they didn't go for that, right? That did not go over well with them, but it is true today. Okay, so then we have another Sabbath. We go immediately to this other story about on another Sabbath. He entered the synagogue and he was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was shriveled, and the scribes and the Pharisees were watching him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath so that they could find a charge against him. Okay, now there is great accusation in this passage, isn't there? The scribes and Pharisees were watching him closely. Now, if we just stopped right there, you'd say, "Oh, they're really wanting to know who he is, and they're watching him closely." But then we go on and we see here's why they were watching him. They wanted to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. They wanted to see what's he going to do with that guy with the shriveled hand. Is he going to heal him on the Sabbath? But why do they want to know that? Not because they're interested. Can he do it? Will he do it? What does he think? What's his? We keep going so that they could find a charge against him. So their whole motivation here was to find some way to accuse Jesus, to try to denigrate him in the eyes of the people, to try to nullify any kind of authority that he may have or influence that he may be gaining. That they wanted to try to minimize who he was, to basically say this guy's a lawbreaker, this guy doesn't honor the Sabbath, he doesn't honor our traditions. They wanted to try to push him over to the side, right? That's what they're trying to accomplish here. They have no interest in actually learning and trying to understand and seeing and figuring out who Jesus is so that they know whether they should follow him or not. They've already decided we're not going to follow him. So all we're looking for is, can we find a law he breaks? And it's interesting because they have the suspicion that he actually can heal the man with the shriveled hand. They're going to see if he's going to heal him. Not because they want to see if he's really God and has that power, but because if he does it on the Sabbath, well, we got him now. Okay, so you see that motivation. And Jesus knows that. He knew their thoughts. And I don't know if he knew their thoughts because Jesus knows men, because he knew he could see it in their eyes, or maybe he knew their thoughts because he's God and he knows their thoughts. He told the man with the shriveled hand, get up and stand here. Jesus basically kind of, let's do this. Let's do this. Get up and stand here. So he got up and he stood there. And then Jesus said to them, you see this? Jesus said to them, he talks then to the Pharisees, to the teachers. He talks to them. I ask you, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it? Here's the question that he's asking, okay? Are you supposed to do good things on the Sabbath or bad things? If you have an opportunity to save a life, should you do that? Or should you allow a life to be lost? They have created all of these rules. They've created all these regulations about the Sabbath to the point where the perfect way to keep the Sabbath is to lay in bed and never move. And some of us may say, I'll go for that. I like that Sabbath day, right? To be a perfect rest. But Jesus is saying, if there is a good thing to do, are you supposed to do it or can you do it? Is that okay? You've got your laws for the Sabbath. Tell me about those laws. What do you think? What should I do here? Is it okay for me to help him or not? Now he puts him in a real problem, because Because they can't say, well, you need to do evil, or you should destroy life. So after looking around at them all, so here's what you get, okay? No answer. Nothing. They've got no response because they know that there is no good answer. And so they just remain silent. They don't want to give what they know is the right answer. So they just keep their mouths shut. He told the man, now he talks to the man, stretch out your hand. He did, and his hand was restored. They, however, were filled with rage and started discussing with one another what they might do to Jesus. I want you to notice how many times that Jesus does a miracle, and the people who are watching, this sentence would say they were filled with awe, right? At the way he spoke, at the things that he did. But these people, these leaders, were filled with rage. And they started then discussing, what are we going to do with him? How are we going to get rid of him? He heals a man with a shriveled hand that they could do nothing for. And they're mad about it. They're angry about it. And they decide, we've got to get rid of this guy. You see here their heart, right? Now, I think that there's a couple of things that I want us to grab out of this just real quick. One of those is some people are never going to like anything that God does, okay? Some people are always, because they start out with a negative bent towards the work of God. So they're not ever going to be happy about it. They're never going to rejoice. They're never even going to acknowledge it. That's just because they have this bent. They've already decided what they believe, what they want to do. And that's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to know in our hearts, but we know it's true, okay? The other thing is, Jesus is clearly not just Lord of the Sabbath. He is Lord over all. Look at this. This man just stretches out his hand and immediately it is restored. He is the great physician. He has power to heal. He is the Lord of the Sabbath day, the Lord of all, right? Don't ever forget that. Let's not think that at any time are my ideas or my hopes or my dreams or my preferences or my understandings, at no point are any of those things higher than Jesus. He is the Lord over everything, including how I understand his word, how I interpret, how I think it lives out. He is over all of those things. No matter what I think, he is over all of those things. And there is a time when I need to be in awe of him, just to be in awe of him. I hope this has helped as you study God's word. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to that. Share it with other people. Let them know about it also. We hope you had a good time enjoying this. Hope it's helpful to you as you teach and as you study. We'll see you next week. God bless.